The rain had begun just after dusk, tapping sharply against the tall French windows of Lady Constance Harrowden's drawing room, as though eager to be admitted to the glittering affair inside. Chandeliers blazed, violins hummed, and London's elite floated effortlessly from one conversation to another, pearls flashing, champagne rising like liquid gold in crystal flutes. It was the annual Harrowden Winter Gala, an event so prestigious that invitations were whispered about months in advance. Yet beneath the polished marble floors and practiced laughter, tension coiled like a living thing. Precisely at 9 o'clock, a shrill sound sliced through the music. One of the footmen, pale and shaking, stumbled into the center of the ballroom. "Lady Constance, my lady, it is Sir Reginald. He has been found in the library." Guests began to murmur. The orchestra faltered. Lady Constance, tall, elegant, and wrapped in azure silk, steadied herself on the nearest table. "Found? What do you mean, found?" The footman swallowed hard. "He is dead, my lady." A wave of gasps rippled across the room like wind sweeping over a still lake. For a moment, the gala seemed suspended in eerie silence, the grandeur, the music, the laughter, all replaced with a suffocating dread. Lady Constance whispered, "Good heavens!" No one moved. Then another sound pierced the stillness, a woman's trembling sob. It came from Eleanor Harrowden, Sir Reginald's young second wife, her face bleached of color. She clutched the arm of Charles Whitcomb, Reginald's trusted business partner, who looked as though someone had struck him squarely in the chest. The library door was ajar when the first guests arrived at the scene. A few dared to peer inside, but most remained rooted in the hallway, held back by fear or morbid curiosity. The crackling fire cast long shadows across the bookshelves, illuminating a macabre tableau. There, slumped in his leather chair, sat Sir Reginald Harrowden, financier, philanthropist, and host of half the aristocracy of London. A single gunshot wound pierced his chest. On the Persian rug below him, dark blood had soaked into the threads like ink spreading across parchment. Yet it was not the sight of Sir Reginald himself that caused several guests to recoil. It was the photograph on the side table, a photograph in a silver frame, recent, glossy, unmistakably new, a photograph of Sir Reginald, Lady Constance, and Eleanor, smiling at the seaside 2 months earlier. But there, at the far right edge of the image, barely visible beneath the reflection of light, was a shadow, a human silhouette, unmistakable, ominous, and entirely out of place. Someone had been standing there, just beyond the frame, watching, and someone had wanted Sir Reginald dead. Inspector Grant of Scotland Yard was summoned within minutes, accompanied by his officers. He was a sturdy man with a square jaw and a thick mustache, though not nearly as distinguished as another mustache soon to enter the affair. Grant raised his voice above the buzz of anxious speculation. "No one is to leave the premises. This is now a police matter. I will speak to Lady Constance and Mrs. Harrowden immediately." But behind him, Dr. Harrington, the family physician, shook his head. "Inspector, forgive me, but Sir Reginald was not a man to shoot himself. I saw him only last week. His health was excellent, his temperament more balanced than usual." "Balanced?" murmured Charles Whitcomb, eyes narrowing. "That is not the word I would use." Eleanor flinched at the comment. Grant turned sharply. "You have something to say, Mr. Whitcomb?" Whitcomb hesitated. Too long. "Nothing. Only that Reginald was under considerable financial strain." His voice thinned. "But I suppose that will all come out soon enough." Lady Constance drew herself upright with practiced poise, though her eyes betrayed an icy fear. "Inspector, you must find the murderer. This house cannot be stained by scandal." Grant nodded. "Rest assured, Lady Constance, we will investigate every detail." But even as he spoke, the whispers continued. "Did you see the photograph?" There was someone in it, an intruder. Some say Sir Reginald argued with his wife this afternoon. I heard it was about the inheritance. No, it was Whitcomb. They had quarreled over shares. It was a perfect storm of motives, secrets, and unspoken grievances, a closed circle of suspects, all present under one roof on the very night Sir Reginald Harrowden died. Yet the most curious clue of all was the shadow in the photograph, an anonymous presence captured unintentionally, a warning, or perhaps a silent signature of murder, a clue waiting for the right pair of eyes. At 10 o'clock, precisely an hour after Sir Reginald's body had been discovered, a sleek black motor car stopped before the Harrowden estate. The driver opened the door, and out stepped a small, impeccably dressed man in a tailored suit, with a coat folded neatly over his arm and a hat positioned at an exact, mathematically perfect angle. His polished shoes touched the ground as though reluctant to become wet. His mustache, magnificent, precise, unmistakable, gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Hercule Poirot had arrived. He regarded the house with an expression of solemn curiosity. "Mon Dieu," he murmured to himself, "it seems the festivities have ended sooner than expected." The butler bowed deeply. "Monsieur Poirot, thank goodness you are here. Lady Constance insisted that you be summoned at once." Poirot stepped inside, his gaze traveling over every detail: the disturbed carpet fibers, the half-finished drinks, the faint trace of perfume in the air. His eyes, dark and alert, missed nothing. The great detective touched two fingers lightly to the brim of his hat. "Take me, if you please, to the scene of the tragedy." And as the butler led him toward the library, the whispers grew louder. "He is here! Poirot!" If anyone can uncover the truth. But will he see the shadow? Will he understand what it means? Poirot paused at the library threshold and surveyed the room with meticulous attention. His gaze lingered on the body, the angle of the chair, the spent cartridge, and finally, on the photograph. He lifted it carefully, studying the eerie silhouette at the edge of the frame. His eyes sharpened. "A shadow," Poirot murmured. "But every shadow, mes amis, is cast by something or someone, and that someone is very much present among us tonight." The library smelled faintly of cigar smoke and old leather, a scent of gravitas, of secrets preserved and locked behind gilded spines. Poirot stepped inside delicately, like a conductor appraising an orchestra before raising his baton. Inspector Grant approached with a stiff nod. "Monsieur Poirot, I suppose Lady Constance felt my men were insufficient." Poirot smiled pleasantly. "No, Inspector. She felt the situation required a different method, n'est-ce pas? One that concerns itself less with the physicalities." He gestured lightly at the shell casing, the blood, the overturned glass on the carpet. "And more with the psychology. The human heart, Inspector, is the most unruly detective story of all." Grant grunted but said nothing. Poirot bent over Sir Reginald's body, not touching, simply observing. His eyes traced the angle of the bullet wound, the position of the arms, the faint smudge of ink on the right cuff. Details, each one a paragraph in a story only he knew how to read. Then his attention returned to the framed photograph. He held it at arm's length, studying every millimeter. The seaside, smiling faces, Sir Reginald's hand holding a hat, Lady Constance's pearls glinting, Eleanor's bright eyes. But the shadow, the shadow. "What troubles me," Poirot said softly, "is not that it is there, but that it is so easily seen. A person intending to remain hidden does not leave such an imprint unless—" "Unless they wanted to be seen," Grant interrupted. Poirot dipped his head. "Or unless they were unaware they had been captured." He framed the photograph between his thumbs and forefingers. "A shadow, Inspector, cannot lie. People lie, oh oui, but shadows never." Lady Constance Harrowden waited in the drawing-room, seated stiffly on a velvet chaise. Her gown shimmered under the chandeliers, but her posture was taut, brittle, as though she might splinter under the strain of composure. "Lady Constance," Poirot began as he joined her, "please accept my deepest condolences. Murder, if murder it is a guest most unwelcome." Her lips tightened. "Inspector Grant insists we wait for the doctor's formal report before declaring it murder." "And you, madame?" Poirot asked, gently. "What do you insist?" She hesitated. Poirot watched the flutter of her pulse at her throat. "I insist," she whispered, "that my husband was not suicidal. He was many things. Difficult, stubborn, prideful, but not the sort of man to do this." Poirot folded his hands. "Then we must consider murder. In such cases, we begin with motive." She closed her eyes briefly. Motive is something Reginald cultivated in others far too easily. "Then perhaps you might illuminate for me the complexities of your household." Lady Constance's expression flickered. "Do you mean Eleanor?" Poirot said nothing, but the silence encouraged her. "She is young, far younger than Reginald. Their marriage was a shock. He met her at a charity gala last year. She was a singer with a minor opera company. Reginald became besotted." "And you, madame? You accepted her readily as part of the family?" Lady Constance's laugh was a brittle thing. "I accepted her because I had no choice. One does not argue with the will of Sir Reginald Harrowden." Poirot glanced at the fireplace. "And yet, madame, it seems there was strain." "Strain?" She exhaled sharply. "Reginald was preparing a new will, a revised will. If anything happened to him, Eleanor would inherit nearly everything." Poirot did not blink. "You knew this?" "Everyone knew," she said bitterly. "Reginald made no secret of his intentions." "And how did you feel about them?" She met his eyes with surprising candor. "I felt relief, Monsieur Poirot. Relief that I would no longer be chained to this house or his legacy. I do not need his money. I have my own." Poirot studied her face, composed, controlled, but beneath the surface, something tightened like a string pulled taut. "Merci, Lady Constance. Your honesty is noted." Eleanor Harrowden sat alone in the conservatory, surrounded by orchids and glass. The faint mist on the windows gave her the appearance of a woman suspended in a dream, or a nightmare. Poirot observed her a moment before speaking. "Madame, grief often freezes the heart, but for some, it releases the truth hidden within." She looked up, her eyes shining with tears. "Monsieur Poirot, I loved him." Her voice cracked. "Whatever they say, whatever they think, I loved him." Poirot nodded slowly. "Love, madame, is often questioned in matters of inheritance. It is most unfortunate." "Inheritance?" She flinched. "Is that why you're here? Because they think I could have?" She buried her face in her hands. Poirot waited patiently until she regained control. When she looked up, she whispered, "Reginald changed his will because he wanted to secure my future. He feared his sister, Constance, would challenge the estate. They were always at odds." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And were you at odds with anyone in this house?" Eleanor hesitated. "Yes," she admitted. "Charles Whitcomb. He disliked me intensely. He believed I distracted Reginald from vital business decisions. And he threatened me once." "Threatened you?" Poirot repeated softly. "He said," Eleanor whispered, "women like you ruin empires." Poirot filed the phrase away like a folded note. "And was Sir Reginald indeed distracted?" Poirot asked. She hesitated again, then nodded faintly. "Yes, but he was happier. That must count for something." Poirot stood. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful." But as he turned to go, Eleanor's voice trembled behind him. "Monsieur Poirot, you don't believe I did it, do you?" Poirot paused, his back still toward her. "Madame," he said softly, "I believe only in the truth, and the truth has not yet spoken." Charles Whitcomb awaited Poirot in the study, pacing like a caged animal. He was a tall man with a severe jaw and eyes that darted too quickly for comfort. "Get this over with, Poirot. I know how you types work." Poirot smiled. "Then you will know I begin with simple questions." "Fine." "Did you and Sir Reginald quarrel today?" Whitcomb froze. Then, "Yes," he said sharply. "Over finances. The Harrowden Trust is bleeding funds. I warned him. He didn't listen." "And you were unhappy with Mrs. Harrowden?" Poirot asked politely. Whitcomb's lip curled. "She's a parasite." "You believe she married for financial gain?" "I don't believe it. I know it." He clenched his jaw. If Reginald hadn't been so besotted— Poirot raised a hand. "Merci, Monsieur Whitcomb. One last question." "Yes?" Poirot leaned forward. "Where were you at 9 o'clock?" Whitcomb's eyes narrowed. "In the dining hall, surrounded by half the guests. Check with them." Poirot nodded. "Bon, but remember, alibis can be as fragile as glass." As Poirot stepped back into the corridor, he folded his hands behind his back. 3 suspects, 3 motives, 3 conflicting stories, but only one shadow in the photograph, and Poirot intended to bring that shadow into the light. The Harrowden estate seemed to grow quieter as the night deepened, yet beneath its silence churned a storm of secrets and half-spoken resentments. Poirot, ever observant, moved through the corridors as lightly as a shadow, though unlike the one in the mysterious photograph, his presence brought clarity, not confusion. As he reached the foyer, a commotion drew his attention. 2 footmen struggled to restrain a man who appeared halfway between drunkenness and pure fury. "I demand to see him," the man roared. "You have no right to keep me out." "Sir," one of the footmen stammered, "there has been an incident." "I know what happened. Reginald is dead, and I want answers." Inspector Grant strode forward. "Who are you?" The man steadied himself with effort, breathing hard. "Harold Lockwood." Poirot paused. Lockwood. The name meant nothing yet, but then every mystery needed its unexpected players. "And your connection to the late Sir Reginald?" Grant asked. Lockwood's lips curled. "He ruined me." Grant stiffened. "Ruined you?" "Yes," Lockwood growled. "Ask Whitcomb. Ask anyone in the financial circles of London. Sir Reginald destroyed my company 18 months ago. I lost everything, and now he's dead." His voice cracked. "And you think I would not come?" Poirot stepped forward gently. "Monsieur, grief and rage often wear the same mask. But tell me, why come to night of all nights?" Lockwood stared at him with bloodshot eyes. "Because earlier today, I received this." He pulled from his pocket a letter, crumpled, torn, and stained at the edge. Poirot took it delicately, unfolding it with care. The typed message read, "If you wish to clear your name, come to the Harrowden Gala at 9 p.m. The truth will be revealed." It was unsigned. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And you came, without knowing who summoned you?" Lockwood ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "What choice did I have? My reputation is gone. If someone had information, I had to hear it." Inspector Grant frowned. "And where were you at 9 p.m., the time of the murder?" "On the road," Lockwood snapped. "I arrived at 9:20. Ask your men at the gate." Grant confirmed with a nod. The guards did report a late arrival. Poirot folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "Merci, Monsieur Lockwood. You will not leave the premises, but for now, I have no more questions." Lockwood slumped against the banister, exhausted. "Does this make him a suspect?" Grant muttered. Poirot tapped a finger to his temple. "Every person in this house, Inspector, is a suspect. But this man, he carries anger. Oui. But guilt." Poirot shook his head slightly. No, at least not yet. Returning to the scene of the crime, Poirot examined the library once more. This time he focused not on the body or the objects around it, but on the windows. They were locked, both of them. He checked the latch, intact. He checked the curtains, undisturbed. He studied the faint condensation on the glass. No forced entry, Grant said behind him. So the killer was inside the house. Poirot nodded slowly. Oui, but more importantly, the killer wished it to appear so. Grant frowned. What do you mean? Poirot pointed to the window. Reginald Harrowden kept these windows open at night, a habit, confirmed by the maid. Poirot gestured toward the small pile of ash in the corner. But tonight they are closed. Grant still didn't follow. Poirot sighed with exaggerated patience. If Sir Reginald closed them, the condensation would be uniform, but it is not. He pointed to a narrow streak of clear glass. Someone touched the window from the inside after. It was already closed and cooling. Eliminating the possibility of an intruder from outside, Grant murmured. Just so. Poirot now moved to the desk, specifically to a small camera laying beside the inkwell. A camera, Grant said. Oui, Poirot replied. Used earlier today, no doubt, for capturing the photograph we see. He gestured at the silver frame. But what interests me more, Poirot added, is that someone touched this frame recently. Grant blinked. Recently? Poirot showed him a faint thumb smudge near the bottom corner. And the angle of the frame, slightly askew. Someone moved it, Grant asked. Someone examined it, Poirot corrected, and perhaps wished to understand what the shadow revealed. As Poirot exited the library, he found the butler Burgess waiting with a nervous expression. Monsieur Poirot, might I speak with you in confidence? Mais oui, mon ami, lead the way. They stepped into a narrow servants' corridor. Burgess wrung his hands. Sir, I do not wish to implicate anyone unfairly. Poirot gave a small bow of gratitude. The desire to be fair is admirable, but the desire to hide the truth? He pursed his lips. That is dangerous. Burgess swallowed. Well, earlier this evening I saw Mr. Whitcomb near the library. He looked agitated, pale, almost frightened. Poirot's brows rose. At what time? Approximately 8:45. 15 minutes before Reginald died. That is not all, Burgess continued. I also saw Mrs. Eleanor speaking with Sir Reginald privately. Their voices were raised. Poirot clasped his hands. Merci, you have given me much. Burgess nodded and hurried away, relieved. Grant emerged from behind a pillar. So Whitcomb was near the crime scene. That's enough for me. Poirot lifted a finger. No, Inspector. It is enough for a suspicion, not a conclusion. Grant bristled. Every piece points to him. Angry, pressured, near the library, and Eleanor says he threatened her. Should I ignore that? Poirot's smile was faint. I never ignore anything, but I compare. Compare what? Poirot gestured toward the drawing room. Human behavior, Inspector. The small contradictions. The things that do not match what they wish us to believe. Later, Poirot found Lady Constance speaking quietly with a guest near the staircase. When she saw him approach, she tilted her chin in a polished mask of aristocratic calm. Lady Constance, Poirot said, bowing. One more question, if I may. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed impatience. Who developed the photograph taken earlier today? The one of you, Sir Reginald, and Mrs. Eleanor. Lady Constance's hesitation lasted only a heartbeat, but Poirot saw it. I believe Eleanor brought it to be framed, she said. She insisted it be displayed tonight. Poirot leaned forward, slightly. Ah, she insisted. That is most interesting. Constance blinked. Why? What does it mean? Poirot's expression softened into polite ambiguity. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. And he walked away, leaving Lady Constance staring after him in uneasy silence. As the hour approached midnight, Poirot returned to the library one final time. Standing alone before the photograph, he whispered, "A shadow appears only when there is a source of light. The question is, who wished to shine that light, and upon whom?" He gazed at Sir Reginald's still form. "Mon pauvre monsieur, someone believed silencing you would bring order to their chaos. But murder," Poirot murmured, "brings only greater disorder." Just then, Inspector Grant burst in. "Poirot, we've found something. A revolver in Whitcomb's car. Still warm." Grant's eyes gleamed with triumph. "This is it. Whitcomb is our killer." Poirot remained still. His voice was calm, almost dismissive. "Non, mon ami, this is too soon. Much too soon." He lifted the photograph again, tapping the shadow with one elegant finger. "The answer lies here, and it is not yet ready to reveal itself." Inspector Grant looked as though Christmas had arrived early. His discovery, Whitcomb's car harboring a revolver still faintly warm, had inflated his confidence to the point of near triumph. 2 constables flanked Charles Whitcomb now, their grips tight, their expressions resolute. Whitcomb, however, was indignant. "For the love of God, Grant," he shouted, "you're making a fool of yourself. I didn't kill Reginald." Grant folded his arms smugly. "Your gun, Whitcomb, your motive, your proximity to the library, and now your weapon conveniently appears, still warm." Poirot watched silently, eyes narrowing, not in agreement, but in study. Whitcomb strained against the constables. "That gun was planted. I haven't fired it in months," Grant scoffed. "And who, pray, planted it? A phantom?" Whitcomb shook with anger, but before he could speak, Poirot stepped forward. "Inspector Grant," he said quietly, "a moment, if you please." Grant huffed. "Poirot, this is not the time for another one of your—" "I insist." Grant's irritation simmered, but he relented. "Fine, make it quick." Poirot led him aside, lowering his voice. "Inspector, your gun evidence, it does not align." "With what?" Grant snapped. Poirot gestured toward Whitcomb. "Observe the man. He is angry, oui, but sincere in his denial. And that, I find, is the first curiosity." Grant gave a derisive snort. "Sincerity doesn't matter. Evidence does." "Just so," Poirot replied, "which is why this concerns me. The revolver was found in his car, but not hidden, merely placed, almost as if meant to be discovered immediately." "That doesn't change anything." "Oh, but it changes everything," Poirot said softly. "A murderer seeks concealment, not convenience." Grant crossed his arms. "You think someone planted it to frame him?" "I think," Poirot corrected gently, "that someone hopes you will leap to exactly that conclusion." Grant bristled. "Poirot, I have enough to bring him in." Poirot shrugged with theatrical helplessness. "Then bring him, but you will regret the haste." Grant ignored the warning and signaled to his constables. "Charles Whitcomb, you are under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Harrowden." Whitcomb's face contorted with fury and disbelief. "You're arresting the wrong man," Grant smirked. "Save it for the yard." He was escorted out. Poirot exhaled softly, hands clasped behind him. "Ah, Hastings," he murmured under his breath, though Hastings was not present tonight. "If only you were here to witness what happens when the police act too quickly." A murmur spread through the house within minutes. "Whitcomb has been arrested." "I knew it. He was always temperamental." "And the gun was his. How convenient." "Poor Eleanor. Or perhaps, how fortunate." Poirot overheard these whispers as he passed through the corridor. Rumors, he knew, were like weeds. They grew fastest when watered by ignorance. He paused in the drawing-room doorway. Lady Constance Harrowden sat upright, hands folded in a way too elegant to be genuine. When she saw Poirot, She gestured him forward. "Have they arrested Mr. Whitcomb?" she asked with a hint of hope. "Oui, madame." She let out a long breath. "Then this nightmare may finally be over." Poirot tilted his head. "You believe he is guilty?" "Well," she hesitated, "he was the most openly hostile toward my brother." Her voice softened. "And Reginald had been planning to remove him from the trust. It created enormous resentment." Poirot nodded. "Resentment can be powerful. But tell me, madame, do you not find it curious that the gun was found so easily?" Lady Constance blinked. "You think he planted it badly?" Poirot smiled faintly. "I think, madame, that planting it was the entire point." Lady Constance stiffened. "Then someone is still here. Someone dangerous." Poirot gave a small bow. "Just so." Next, Poirot sought Eleanor Harrowden. He found her in the upper hallway, standing by a window, silhouetted by moonlight. She looked both fragile and strangely resolute. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "is it true? They've taken Mr. Whitcomb?" "Oui, madame." She pressed a hand to her lips. I'm not sure what to feel." Poirot regarded her quietly. "Fear, perhaps?" She nodded. "Yes, because if he didn't do it, then the murderer is still walking freely." Poirot stepped closer. "Madame, may I ask you something delicate?" "Yes." "When you insisted the photograph be displayed tonight, why was that?" She flushed, looking startled. I only wanted something happy to be there. Reginald liked that picture." Poirot studied her expression. Nervous, defensive, but genuine? Perhaps, perhaps not. "And who framed it?" Poirot pressed. "Burgess took it to the study. Reginald had asked him earlier today." "So it was Sir Reginald who wanted it displayed." Eleanor nodded. "He said it represented unity." Poirot filed this away. "Merci, madame, that is all." But as he walked away, he heard her whisper, "What does the shadow mean? Why was someone there?" Poirot did not answer. Meanwhile, Inspector Grant strutted about the billiard room, barking orders at subordinates. He had Whitcomb in custody. He had motive. He had a weapon. But Poirot knew the truth was not so neat, and so did someone else. For while Grant celebrated, Poirot noticed a subtle shift among the guests. A few relaxed too quickly. A few exchanged glances. A few whispered with a lightness inconsistent with the presence of death. Someone in this house believed the danger had passed. Someone believed their plan had succeeded. Poirot, however, saw the flaw. "No," he murmured as he paused near the staircase, gazing upward. "The murderer has overplayed their hand." At nearly 1 a.m, Poirot returned to the library. The fire had burned low, the logs collapsing into glowing embers. The room felt colder now, darker, the weight of the crime more oppressive. The photograph still sat on the table. Poirot lifted it again. The shadow had not changed, of course. Quiet, ominous, fixed in its position. But suddenly, a thought struck him. He stared harder, then he leaned closer. His breath caught. "Ah," he whispered. "Mon Dieu, I had not noticed before." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with renewed clarity. "It is not the figure itself that matters, but its posture." A shadow leaning forward, a head tilted slightly, an arm lifted, as though holding something like a camera, Poirot finished quietly, or perhaps a gun. Suddenly, footsteps sounded behind him. Burgess appeared, trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, something has happened?" Poirot straightened. "What is it, mon ami?" It's Mrs. Eleanor," Burgess stammered. "She's gone." Poirot froze. "Gone?" he repeated. Burgess nodded rapidly. "Her room is empty, the window open. She fled." Inspector Grant came racing down the corridor. "Poirot, the young widow has escaped. Whitcomb must have had an accomplice." Poirot stared at the photograph in his hand. "No," he whispered. A chill ran through him. "This is no escape. This is fear." He set the photograph down and turned to Grant with sudden urgency. "Inspector, assemble everyone, now! The real killer has been watching all along." The house felt different now, charged, alert, as though every chandelier and portrait leaned forward to listen. Eleanor's disappearance had transformed the Harrowden estate from a place of mourning to a place of fear. Even the walls seemed to echo with unease. Inspector Grant stormed into the drawing room where the remaining guests had gathered. "Search the grounds! She cannot have gone far! Check every gate, every servant's exit! Move!" Constables rushed out, boots thudding across the marble floors. Lady Constance sat rigidly, her fingers clasped tight enough to whiten the knuckles. This is appalling. If Eleanor fled, she must have something to hide. Poirot entered the room quietly, though his presence overpowered every other thought. "Madame," he said gently, "the act of fleeing does not always indicate guilt. Sometimes it indicates terror." Constance frowned. "Terror of what?" Poirot did not answer. Instead, he motioned toward the assembled guests. Servants, dignitaries, socialites. A closed circle, each one wearing fear or suspicion like a tailored garment. He stepped toward Charles Whitcomb's empty chair. "We have a man arrested for the crime." Poirot tapped the back of the chair lightly. "But I assure you, all is not as it seems." Grant rolled his eyes. "Poirot, this is hardly the time for riddles." Poirot ignored him. "I will speak to each of you again," he declared. "For the truth, it trembles on the edge of revelation." A shiver ran through the room. Poirot's first private conversation was with Lady Constance. He found her by the fireplace, staring into the embers as though they might rewrite the evening for her. "Lady Constance," he said softly, "may I inquire about your relationship with your brother in his final days?" Her gaze sharpened. "Are you implying something, Monsieur Poirot?" "I imply nothing. I clarify." She took a breath. "Reginald and we disagreed, yes, but I never wanted him dead. I wanted distance, not tragedy." Poirot stepped closer. "You mentioned earlier that Reginald was preparing a new will. Did you know its contents?" "No," she replied swiftly. Too swiftly. Poirot observed the flick of her eyes, the tension in her jaw. "You are certain?" Her voice tightened. "I had no interest in his finances." "No," Poirot said gently. "But others did." She froze. Poirot continued. "He intended to leave most of his estate to Eleanor, yes?" Constance nodded reluctantly. "And how did this sit with you?" Something flickered in her expression, a flash of resentment buried beneath aristocratic poise. "It surprised me. Eleanor hardly knew him." Poirot gave a small smile. "Sometimes the shortest acquaintance reveals the greatest truths." Constance looked away. "You speak in riddles, monsieur." "Perhaps, but the heart, madame, is rarely simple." Poirot next sought Mr. Lockwood, the ruined financier. He found him gripping a glass of brandy, staring blankly at a painting on the wall. "Mr. Lockwood," Poirot said, "your letter, this summons to the gala. Did you keep the envelope?" Lockwood blinked. "The envelope? No, I tore it open on the way. I didn't keep it." Poirot sighed. "A pity. It would have told me much." "Much?" Lockwood rubbed his temples. "I simply want my life back." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And yet you threatened Sir Reginald publicly 2 months ago. In your anger, you said he would regret the day he destroyed you." Lockwood's voice shook. "I never meant it. My anger died long ago. I came because I hoped desperately that someone finally knew the truth." Poirot placed a hand on his shoulder, surprisingly gentle. "And I believe you, but fear not. You are a piece of this puzzle, not its solution." Lockwood's eyes glistened with both relief and confusion. Then who is the solution? Poirot offered a small, enigmatic smile. Someone who has made a mistake. The search for Eleanor continued with rising panic. Constables returned from the garden empty-handed. The stables yielded no trace. A maid reported the widow's coat missing. Inspector Grant paced the hallway furiously. "She's escaping justice." Poirot approached him calmly. "Inspector, you chase the shadow, but not the source." Grant glared. "Poirot, enough poetry." "Very well," Poirot said sharply. "Let me show you something concrete." He handed Grant the photograph. "Look at the shadow again, mon ami. Really look." Grant stared at it, squinting. Yes, someone was standing there. "No." Poirot tapped the edge. "The angle of the light suggests the figure was standing close, not far. Too close to be unnoticed by the photographer." Grant blinked. "So the shadow was meant to be seen?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, a message, but to whom?" Before Grant could answer, a loud crack sounded outside. A gunshot. Guests screamed. Servants ducked. Grant drew his revolver. Poirot remained perfectly still. "A gunshot at this hour," he murmured. "The game advances." Everyone rushed toward the source of the noise, the conservatory. Glass panes trembled as the doors were thrown open. At first glance, the room appeared empty except for the moonlight spilling through the windows. Then, someone gasped. "Look!" A faint trail of footprints, muddy, hurried, led toward the far wall. And there, lying on the floor near the orchids, was Eleanor Harrowden, unconscious, pale as moonlight, but alive. Poirot swept forward, kneeling beside her. Grant checked for wounds. "She's unharmed. No bullet wounds. The gunshot must have been fired elsewhere." Poirot lifted Eleanor's wrist gently. "Her pulse is weak," he murmured. "But she is breathing. She collapsed from fear, not injury." Suddenly Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. Poirot leaned close. "Madame." "Who? Frightened you?" Her eyes widened in terror. She whispered one word. "Shadow!" Then she fainted again. Lady Constance screamed. Lockwood stumbled back. Guests cried out. Inspector Grant turned to Poirot, shaken. "She saw someone! The murderer!" Poirot rose slowly, his face profoundly grave. "No, Inspector," he said. "She did not see the murderer." He pointed to the photograph in Grant's hands. "She recognized them." A ripple of cold dread spread through the room. Grant swallowed. "Poirot? Who is it?" Poirot's voice dropped to a near whisper. "I know the identity, but I lack the final proof." He straightened, eyes blazing with determination. "And so," he announced, "we must prepare for a trap." The Harrowden estate thrummed with unease. Eleanor Harrowden had been carried upstairs, placed under close watch, and sedated gently at Poirot's request. Inspector Grant doubled the police presence, yet the atmosphere remained charged, like a violin string pulled to breaking point. Poirot stood in the conservatory doorway, eyes lowered, fingertips pressed together. He looked not defeated, but contemplative, like a mathematician refining the final equation. Grant approached, brow furrowed. "She said shadow, Poirot. She recognized the figure from the photograph. That's enough to arrest someone. Who was it?" Poirot looked at him mildly. "Inspector, to arrest on a single word spoken under terror. Non, we must proceed with precision." Grant grumbled. "So what's your next move? You mentioned a trap." Poirot smiled faintly. "Oui, a trap of psychology, of conscience, of ego." His eyes gleamed. "But first I require one thing, all suspects gathered in one room." "You want another interrogation?" Poirot shook his head. No, an observation." The drawing room was assembled in hurried tension. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits on the wallpaper. Lockwood leaned heavily against a table, pale and exhausted. Lady Constance sat elegantly, though her eyes betrayed growing dread. Whitcomb's empty chair sat like a ghost in their midst, unsettling everyone, and Burgess the butler hovered anxiously near the door. Poirot stood before them, hands clasped neatly behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we find ourselves at the center of a drama most perilous. A man is dead, a woman has fled and collapsed from fright, and tonight—" He paused, letting the silence coil tightly around them. "A murderer moves among us." Lady Constance shivered. Lockwood hissed, "Get to the point, Poirot." Poirot nodded. "Very well. I will ask only one question." He lifted the infamous photograph. "Who took this photograph?" A hush fell so complete, it seemed the whole house held its breath. Lady Constance blinked. I do not know." Lockwood shook his head. "It wasn't me. Why would I?" Burgess cleared his throat. "Sir Reginald set the timer on the camera. He told me himself." Poirot's eyebrows rose smoothly. "Ah, a timer. And yet, mes amis, someone else was present." He tapped the shadow on the photograph. "Someone close enough that their silhouette is captured so clearly." The air tightened. Poirot studied each face meticulously. "I will ask again," he said softly. "Who took this photograph?" No one answered. Grant groaned. "Poirot, this isn't—" But Poirot raised a finger. "Shh! The silence speaks." He stepped closer to the group. "For someone here, this photograph is a memory of guilt." Lady Constance's jaw clenched. Lockwood's hands trembled. Burgess wiped his brow. Poirot lowered the photograph. "Tonight, that person will make a mistake." As he turned to leave, he whispered, only loud enough for the room to hear, "And I will be listening." The storm outside intensified, sheets of rain battering the windows. Poirot moved through the corridors like a ghost, noting every whisper of movement, every shift of emotion. His trap was simple. Pressure. Let the murderer believe Poirot was close. Very close. Grant caught up with him near the staircase. "You're provoking them," Poirot nodded. "Mais oui. What if it pushes the killer to strike again?" Poirot stopped. His voice dropped. "That is exactly what I expect." Grant paled. "Poirot? Do not worry, Inspector. I am not blind to the danger. I anticipate where the next blow will fall." Grant swallowed. "Where?" Poirot looked upstairs, toward Eleanor's room. "There," he whispered. As midnight approached, the house fell into an uneasy hush. Poirot positioned himself at the end of the corridor leading to Eleanor's room, concealed in a shadowed alcove. Grant waited farther down, a revolver in hand. Minutes passed with excruciating slowness. Then, a faint click. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A door opening. Silent, careful footsteps. A figure moved toward Eleanor's room. Dark clothes, careful gait, gloved hands. Poirot stepped forward silently. But before he could speak, a scream tore through the hallway. Not Eleanor. Not the intruder. A different voice entirely. Poirot and Grant sprinted toward the sound, which had come from the opposite direction. Down the servants' corridor, they burst into the small office near the kitchen. And froze. Lady Constance Harrowden lay on the floor, motionless, eyes open. A thin line of blood trickled from her temple. Grant knelt, checking her pulse. "She's alive, but unconscious. She was struck." Poirot's gaze swept the room instantly. There was no sign of a struggle, just a toppled chair and a shattered teacup. "What was she doing here?" Grant muttered. Poirot bent down, eyes narrowing at a piece of paper on Constance's lap. A torn photograph. Poirot lifted it carefully. It was the same seaside picture, but torn precisely where the shadow appeared. Only the 3 smiling faces remained. Grant's breath caught. She tried to hide the evidence. "No," Poirot whispered. She tried to destroy it. Then she was the killer. Poirot shook his head sharply. Non, non, Inspector. Think, if she were the murderer, why flee here? Why not escape the house? Why tear the photograph now, when suspicion already points away from her? Grant hesitated. Then someone caught her. And silenced her, Poirot finished grimly. His eyes scanned the floor, a single muddy footprint. He knelt. And not long ago, he murmured, touching the moist edge. Grant looked stunned. The killer attacked Constance instead of Eleanor? Poirot shook his head again, slowly, deliberately. Not instead, Inspector, as well. Grant frowned. What do you mean? Poirot rose to his feet, eyes blazing with realization. It is not the widow they fear, nor the sister. His gaze swept toward the staircase. It is the truth that frightens them. And they will strike again before dawn. Constance was taken to a guest room under guard. The staff rushed, whispered, panicked. Grant sent more constables to secure every exit. Poirot stood alone near the window, staring out at the storm. The pieces of the puzzle swirled like leaves in the gale. A shadow captured accidentally, or purposefully. A murderer who could not risk Eleanor waking. Constance attacked while trying to tear evidence. Whitcomb framed. A letter summoning Lockwood. A window opened in Eleanor's room. A footprint that appeared too conveniently. Poirot breathed deeply. Always the psychology, he murmured. The little gray cells. They speak. And suddenly, they screamed the truth. Poirot's eyes widened. Ah, he whispered. So that is your game. He straightened, spine rigid, posture electric with revelation. The second crime was not a strike of opportunity. It was desperation. He turned sharply toward Grant. Inspector, we must find Burgess, immediately. Grant blinked. The butler? Why? But he never finished the sentence. Burgess was nowhere to be found. A window in the servants' corridor stood open, letting in cold, violent wind. Poirot whispered, It has begun. For the first time since his arrival, Poirot moved with urgency. Not haste, never that, but purpose sharpened to a fine, gleaming point. As constables spread through the Harrowden estate shouting for Burgess, the detective's steps were quick, deliberate, and unerring. Inspector Grant hurried beside him. Poirot, this is absurd. Burgess is a butler, not a murderer. Poirot stopped so abruptly that Grant nearly collided with him. No, Inspector, Poirot said softly. He is not the murderer, but he is the key. Grant stared uneasily. What do you mean? Poirot resumed walking. Burgess witnessed something that made him dangerous to the killer. And now, he flees not because he is guilty, but because he fears he may be the next to die. Grant scratched the back of his head. You're saying the murderer attacked Lady Constance to silence her before she revealed what she discovered? Poirot nodded. Exactement. Lady Constance saw something in the photograph. A detail subtle, hidden, but unmistakable once one looks for it. That is why she tried to tear it. And Burgess? Grant asked. What did he see? Poirot's voice dropped. Not what, Inspector? When? They reached the study, the room Sir Reginald used for private matters, and, more importantly, where the photograph had been framed earlier that day. Poirot closed the door behind them and gestured toward the camera still resting on the desk. Observe, Inspector, he said. The camera, the timer, the position of the tripod marks on the carpet. Grant squinted. Yes, he took the picture himself. Poirot shook his head gently. Reginald set the timer, but the shadow tells us he did not press the button while standing with the others. Someone else started the timer after moving into the frame. Grant frowned. But who? Poirot lifted the photograph, holding it under the lamp. You see this shadow? Look closely, Inspector. You have looked at its shape, its presence, but never its position. Grant leaned in. Poirot tapped the faint outline of the head. The shadow is too close to the group. If the person were behind them, the scale would be different. But if the person were in front, just out of frame, they would have blocked the sunlight. Grant gasped. The photographer wasn't behind them. He was beside them? Poirot straightened triumphantly. Oui. He positioned furniture to mimic the scene. Picture this, Inspector. The camera is set. Reginald walks into place. Eleanor joins him. Lady Constance stands on the right. They all smile. But before the shutter closes, he stepped into the imagined position of the shadow. Someone leans forward, holding something. Grant swallowed. A gun. Poirot nodded. Or a camera of their own. But most telling, look at the angle. This shadow belongs to someone taller than any person in the photograph, yet thinner in outline. Grant blinked. That's very specific. Poirot smiled faintly. Patterns always are. He returned to the photograph and pointed to the bottom corner. You see here? A faint imprint. A shoe. Whoever stood here stepped on soft ground. But the pattern, it is the same as the footprint found near Lady Constance tonight. Grant stiffened. But that footprint was small, not large. Poirot beamed. Just so, mon ami. Which means the shadow did not belong to Burgess, nor to Lockwood, nor to Mr. Whitcomb. He lowered the photograph like a verdict. It belonged to a woman. Grant froze. A woman! Poirot's eyes glittered. A woman of considerable cunning, who inserted herself into a family already cracking under strain. Someone who played the grieving widow flawlessly. Grant inhaled sharply. Eleanor? Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Inspector. The answer is not delivered so quickly. Eleanor is a victim tonight. Perhaps of fear, perhaps of guilt. We cannot be sure. But there is another woman in this house with motive, opportunity, and access. Grant frowned. Lady Constance? Poirot's voice softened. Lady Constance feared losing her inheritance, oui. But more importantly, she feared what Sir Reginald had discovered. Grant stiffened. Discovered? What did Reginald find? Poirot picked up a small object from the corner of the desk, a torn scrap of paper. He held it out. Letterhead. Harrowden Investments, and beneath it, in faint typewriter ink. Fraudulent activity traced internally. Grant sucked in a breath. Someone inside the Harrowden household was stealing. Poirot nodded slowly. Reginald confronted them. They panicked, and so they silenced him. Grant stumbled back. But which one? Constance? Burgess? Eleanor? Poirot tapped the paper. There is handwriting on the reverse. Grant flipped it over. His eyes widened. It's Eleanor's, he whispered. Poirot placed a hand on Grant's shoulder. Do not jump to conclusions. Eleanor's writing may have been forged or planted. Grant's face flushed with frustration. Poirot, we're running in circles. Non, Poirot said firmly. We are closing in. He turned toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass like tears. We must find Burgess. He is the missing link. At that moment, the door burst open. A constable rushed in breathlessly. Inspector, we found him. Grant stiffened. Burgess, where? The constable looked pale. In the greenhouse. Poirot's expression darkened. Alive? He asked. The constable hesitated. Barely. Poirot and Grant exchanged a grim glance. Go, Poirot said sharply. They entered the greenhouse, a humid, glass-walled space filled with exotic flowers. The rain hammered overhead like a drum. Burgess lay slumped against a potting table, bleeding from a wound at the back of his head. A constable held a cloth to the injury. When Burgess saw Poirot, he tried to rise. Poirot knelt beside him. Mon ami, he said softly, who did this to you? Burgess swallowed painfully. His lips trembled. It wasn't a man, he whispered. Grant leaned in. Then who? Burgess's breath came in shallow bursts. She said no one would believe me. Poirot felt a cold shiver run down his spine. She, he repeated. Burgess nodded. Mrs. Harrowden? Grant gasped. Eleanor! But Poirot didn't move. He watched, Burgess's eyes carefully. No, Poirot whispered. Not Eleanor. Burgess's hand shook as he pointed weakly toward the rain-streaked glass. Poirot followed his gaze and froze. A silhouette stood outside, a woman's silhouette. Elegant, tall, still as death. Poirot whispered, Lady Constance. Lady Constance Harrowden's silhouette lingered for only a heartbeat before vanishing into the storm. The greenhouse glass rattled under the wind as Poirot rose, his expression unreadable, his little gray cells blazing with certainty. Inspector Grant drew his revolver. She's running! Poirot placed a firm hand on his arm. No, Inspector, not running, retreating. There is a difference. Grant frowned. Retreating to where? To wherever she believes she still holds control, Poirot murmured, which is rapidly diminishing. They helped lift Burgess carefully. The butler clung to consciousness, his voice faint. I tried to tell her. I tried to tell Mr. Whitcomb. Sir Reginald suspected. The accounts were altered. Hush, mon ami, Poirot said. You must rest. You have done enough. Grant's impatience flared again. Poirot, either she attacked him or she didn't. Oh, she attacked him, Poirot said quietly, because Burgess saw what no one else did, the moment the shadow was cast in the photograph. Grant blinked. But Eleanor's the one who stood closest. Poirot held up a finger. No, Eleanor was on the left, Sir Reginald in the middle, Lady Constance on the right. He pointed to the faint but unmistakable lean of the silhouette. The shadow leans left, not right. Thus it cannot be Eleanor. And Burgess witnessed Lady Constance disposing of something earlier, something she attempted to hide. Grant's features tightened. Then why not arrest her right now? Poirot exhaled slowly. Because we still lack the one thing she believes destroyed, the full truth. He picked up the torn photograph fragment from Burgess's hand. Someone hid the original negative. Someone who knew the photograph was far more dangerous than the shadow suggests. Grant paled. You think Constance has the negative? Poirot straightened. She has, perhaps, destroyed it, or believes she has. But a murderer in full panic will always reveal more, and panic, Inspector, has now begun. The storm hammered the mansion with renewed force as Poirot and Grant moved back inside. Lightning carved jagged lines through the sky, illuminating every corner of the grand estate like interrogators' lamps. The guests had been ushered into the main hall for safety. Fear flickered in their eyes, but among them, Lockwood, trembling, Eleanor, sedated but breathing, the unconscious Constance being tended upstairs. No one dared speak above a whisper. Poirot addressed Grant quietly. We must return to the library. Grant blinked. The library? At a time like this? Poirot nodded. The stage must match the first crime for the murderer to feel compelled to act once more. As they entered the library, Poirot moved with surgical precision. He walked the perimeter of the room, mentally resurrecting Sir Reginald's final moments. He stopped at the window. The killer closed this window after the murder to give the illusion of isolation, but they overlooked the condensation streak. A small mistake, but enough. Grant paced impatiently. Poirot, are we not wasting precious time? Poirot's gaze sharpened. No, we are tempting fate. He took out the photograph again and placed it carefully on the desk. Grant's eyes narrowed. You're baiting her. Exactement. Why put it out in the open? Poirot lifted a brow. Because, Inspector, the criminal cannot resist revising their own story, the disorder. They cannot bear it. Grant stared at him, then the photograph, then the door. You're expecting her to come back here? Poirot gave a small nod. The storm roared. A floorboard creaked outside the room. Both men froze. Poirot whispered, "You will see." Slow footsteps passed along the corridor. Too slow, too careful to be a patrolling constable. Poirot motioned Grant to step into the deeper shadows of the shelves. The door opened, and Lady Constance Harrowden stepped in. Her hair was damp from the rain. Her dress clung to her in elegant disarray. Her eyes glittered with a cold, contained fury. She held a long, thin object wrapped in cloth. Grant tightened his grip on his revolver, but Poirot held up a hand to stop him. Constance approached the desk, staring down at the photograph. The torn copy she had attempted to destroy trembled in her hand. "We were meant to be perfect," she whispered, to the room, to herself, to Reginald's absent ghost. "We were meant to keep the Harrowden line unbroken, and then he betrayed everything." She reached for the photograph, hesitated, then unwrapped the object in her hand. A metal poker. "Ah," Poirot whispered softly from the shadows, revealing himself. "A symbolic weapon. Fitting, madame. Rage expressed not with a gun, but something more personal." Constance spun, eyes flashing. "You!" "Oui, madame," Poirot said calmly, stepping forward. "You have returned to the scene of your crime." Her breath hitched, but she held the poker high. "Stay back!" Grant emerged, revolver raised. "Drop it, Lady Harrowden." She laughed, once sharp. "Is that what you think? That I killed my own brother?" Poirot lifted a hand, silencing Grant. "Lady Constance," he said with great gentleness, "I know you struck Burgess. I know you tried to destroy the photograph, but you did not kill your brother." Constance froze, poker trembling. "What?" Poirot approached slowly. "You are many things, madame. Proud, controlling, fearful of losing Harrowden legacy. But a murderer!" He shook his head. "No." Grant gasped. "Poirot, what?" Constance's eyes filled with tears, not relief, but confusion and dread. Poirot stepped beside her and pointed to the torn photograph. "You tried to destroy this, not because it incriminated you, but because it revealed the terrible truth you could not face." "What truth?" Constance whispered. Poirot held up the picture under the lamplight, revealing what she had seen earlier. "Lady Constance," he said softly, "the shadow does not belong to you." She shook her head violently. "No, no." Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. "It belongs to someone you loved, someone you trusted, someone who stood beside your brother even as the shutter clicked." Constance stared at the picture, eyes wide with horror. "No," she breathed. "It cannot be." Poirot nodded gently. "Yes, madame." His voice echoed through the library, quiet yet earth-shattering. "The shadow in the photograph belongs to Eleanor Harrowden." The storm outside roared with unrestrained fury as midnight surrendered to the slow creep of dawn. The Harrowden estate, battered by wind and scandal, seemed almost to tremble beneath the weight of its own secrets. Constables moved through the halls, securing every door, every window, every uncertain corner. Poirot had requested one thing. Everyone present must gather in the great hall. No exceptions. And so they came, some limping, some trembling, some furious, and some haunted. Lady Constance, shaken but conscious, was escorted in, her pride reduced but not erased. Mr. Lockwood, disheveled and pale. Charles Whitcomb, brought from custody under guard, confusion etched deep into his features. Eleanor Harrowden, weak but awake, watched with tear-streaked dread. Burgess, bandaged, supported by two constables. Inspector Grant, revolver holstered yet restless. A perfect tableau of tension. Poirot stood before them, small and immaculate, hands folded behind his back, mustache gleaming like a heraldic emblem. His posture radiated control, authority, finality. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice ringing clearly through the cavernous hall, "we have reached the point in our drama where shadows step into the light." A shiver ran across the room. Grant shifted impatiently. "Poirot, if you know who the murderer is, get to it." Poirot lifted a dignified finger. "All in good time, Inspector. Order and method must prevail." He turned to the assembled group. "You have all been trapped by your own secrets, by your fears, by the illusions you wished others to believe." His sharp gaze swept them, and most importantly, by a single photograph. He held up the framed picture, the one taken at the seaside. "Here lies the truth," Poirot declared. "A truth so simple, so delicate, so precise, that only one who studies the psychology, the human arrangement, can understand it." Eleanor flinched visibly. Whitcomb scowled. Lady Constance pressed a trembling hand to her throat. Poirot stepped forward. "Let us begin." Sir Reginald was preparing a new will, Poirot said, one that greatly favored his young wife, Eleanor. Gasps echoed. Eleanor shrank. "Yes, madame," Poirot continued gently. "You knew this. Lady Constance knew this. Whitcomb resented it. Lockwood was devastated financially. Every person in this room had a motive, save perhaps Burgess, who merely wished to keep his employment." He turned to Whitcomb. "Your anger with Reginald was fierce, but direct. You confronted him often. You are not a man of stealth." Whitcomb nodded bitterly. "That's true." Poirot faced Lockwood. "And you, monsieur, were summoned by a mysterious letter, a letter not written by Sir Reginald, a ploy to ensure you were present, to muddy the waters." Lockwood's jaw tightened. "Someone wanted me here." "Exactly." Poirot's voice dropped. "And someone wanted Whitcomb framed." Grant stiffened. "That revolver in your car," Poirot said to Whitcomb. "It was placed there, recently, by a hand meticulous enough to wipe it clean, but careless enough to warm the barrel." Whitcomb sighed. "I told you." Poirot raised a calming hand. "I know, monsieur. I never believed you fired that gun." Poirot lifted the picture high. "This photograph," he explained, "was thought to be a keepsake, but it was, in truth, a record of a betrayal." He traced the outline of the faint silhouette. "Note the angle of the shadow. Note the posture, the lean. This is not the shadow of someone standing behind the camera. It is cast by someone standing near the subjects, leaning into frame just as the shutter closed." He set the photograph on the table. "Reginald set the timer, yes, but he expected someone else to take the picture before stepping into place. Someone he trusted." The room held its breath. Poirot's voice turned soft, chilling. "That shadow belongs to a woman." Every eye darted to Eleanor. Eleanor trembled violently. "No, Poirot, please, I didn't—" He raised a kindly hand. "Calm yourself, madame. I do not mean you." Silence crashed like thunder. Poirot turned slowly, deliberately, toward Lady Constance. Her eyes widened. A soft whimper escaped her. "No," she whispered. "You're wrong. You must be wrong." Poirot shook his head gently. "Your height, your posture, the angle of your shoulders, all match the shadow. You were there, just outside the frame, leaning forward." Constance stumbled backward, grasping a pillar. I only went to speak to him." "Oui," Poirot said, "to confront him." He moved closer. "And it was then, Lady Constance, that you realized what Reginald had discovered. Fraud. Money diverted from the Harrowden estate." Gasps erupted. Constance's voice broke. "I did not steal. I only took what was needed to keep the estate afloat." Poirot nodded sadly. "And Sir Reginald confronted you about it. The photograph was taken seconds before that confrontation." The room trembled with tension. "But," Poirot continued, "you did not kill him." Constance's breath caught. "What?" Poirot stepped closer. You confronted him, yes. You argued. You perhaps feared exposure. But you left that argument alive, shaken, terrified, but not murderous. Constance collapsed into the chair, sobbing in equal parts relief and shame. Whitcomb whispered, "Then who?" Poirot turned. His eyes landed on Eleanor, but his words did not. Instead, he addressed Burgess. "Mon ami," Poirot said kindly, "when did you last see Sir Reginald alive?" Burgess swallowed. "A few minutes before the music began, he asked me to fetch the framed photo from the study." Poirot nodded. "And who else was present?" Burgess hesitated. "Mrs. Harrowden. Eleanor." Gasps. Poirot lifted a finger. "But Eleanor is too short to cast that shadow." He turned once more, toward another woman, one overlooked, one quiet, one present since the beginning. The hush deepened as Poirot's gaze swept to the corner, at a maid, trembling, eyes red from crying. Annie, the youngest servant, always in the background, always obedient, always unnoticed. Poirot spoke softly, almost mournfully. "Mademoiselle Annie, you were the photographer Reginald asked for. You took the picture, and your shadow, your silhouette, is the one captured." Annie's breath hitched. Her hands flew to her mouth. Constance stared in disbelief. "Annie, but she's just a servant." Poirot shook his head. "No, madame, not just a servant. She was the one who discovered Sir Reginald's investigation first. She overheard conversations. She handled the accounts under your instruction. She alone knew how deeply the estate was failing." He stepped closer. "And she alone feared what Reginald's new will would mean for the staff. Eleanor's inheritance would have ended many positions, including hers. She panicked." Annie's tears streamed. No, she whispered. "I didn't mean to. I only wanted to frighten him. I didn't mean—" Poirot raised his voice. "But when he threatened to expose everything, your fraud with Lady Constance, your forged signatures, your unauthorized withdrawals, you saw your life crumble." Annie sobbed into her hands. "Yes," Poirot whispered. "You fired the gun. You framed Whitcomb. You summoned Lockwood. You tried to silence Eleanor and Constance." He took a step back. "Everything fits." The hall fell silent. Annie collapsed to her knees. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. I loved this house." Poirot bowed his head solemnly. "As did we all, mademoiselle. But love, twisted by fear, becomes very dangerous." Inspector Grant stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Annie Farnham," he said, voice firm, "you are under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Harrowden and the attempted murders of Eleanor Harrowden and Lady Constance Harrowden." Annie wept as she was taken away. Poirot closed his eyes. The storm outside finally began to subside. The storm that had battered the Harrowden estate finally exhausted itself, leaving the dawn pale and trembling across the lawns. The once roaring wind fell to a sigh, brushing against windows still rattling from the night's tension. Inside, the house was hushed, drained of panic, of speculation, of the feverish dread that had filled every corridor. The murderer had been revealed. Annie Farnham, the quiet maid no one had noticed, no one had suspected, no one had ever truly seen, now sat handcuffed in the morning room, flanked by 2 constables. Tears streaked her face, but no more words came. She had confessed enough in her collapse. Her guilt was clear, and the shadows in the photograph had spoken with final authority. The household, though relieved, remained shaken. Whitcomb stood apart from the others, leaning against a stone column, shame and exhaustion etching deep lines into his usually stern face. Lady Constance, wrapped in a shawl, sat with uncharacteristic fragility before the unlit hearth. Lockwood lingered near the doorway, as if unsure whether he was guest or ghost. Poirot entered quietly, every eye turning to him. Inspector Grant stepped forward, looking stunned and begrudgingly impressed. "Poirot," he said, rubbing his brow. "I'll admit it. When you said the shadow belonged to a woman, I thought you were aiming at Eleanor, or Constance. But the maid. Poirot gave a small bow. "The great tragedies of life, Inspector, do not always involve the powerful. Sometimes the heart most desperate is the heart most ignored." Grant sighed. "I'll take her to the yard. A full confession will follow." Poirot nodded. "Be gentle with her." Grant's brows rose. "After what she's done..." Poirot's eyes softened. "Mercy is not the enemy of justice. One must sometimes feel pity, even for those whose minds have twisted under fear." Grant left to oversee the arrest, and Poirot turned to the remaining household. She sat near the window, pale and trembling, her hands clasped tightly. When Poirot approached, she lifted her eyes with both terror and gratitude. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would she hurt me? Why would she try to silence me?" Poirot sat opposite her. "Because, madame, you were the one person whose innocence was certain, and therefore the one person whose testimony she could not manipulate. Annie was terrified you might remember something from the moment after the photograph was taken. Perhaps her voice, perhaps her proximity. She feared your mind might restore details she wished buried." Eleanor swallowed. "But I hardly remember anything." Poirot nodded gently. "Fear scatters memory, but the murderer could not risk even a fragment." Eleanor closed her eyes. "And she killed Reginald. For money?" "No," Poirot said quietly. "For survival. She was complicit in the financial mismanagement Lady Constance sought to hide. When she realized Sir Reginald had uncovered the fraud, and that a new will would alter the household entirely, she panicked. A desperate heart is capable of terrible things." Eleanor wiped a tear. "It still feels unreal." Poirot bowed his head. "Most tragedies do, until time gives them shape." Poirot found Constance sitting by the extinguished fireplace, staring into cold ashes. "You wish to speak, madame?" Poirot asked. She hesitated. I do not know whether to thank you or curse you." Poirot inclined his head. "I receive both with equal elegance." Constance gave a weak laugh. "You spared me from being seen as a murderer, but you also uncovered my part in the financial deception." Poirot's gaze was kind, but firm. "Madame, you sought only to protect the Harrowden legacy, though in a misguided way. You are guilty of misjudgment, oui, but not of murder." Her lip trembled. "And what now? The estate is ruined. Reginald is gone. Eleanor inherits everything." Poirot sat beside her. "Madame, the estate can be rebuilt. Money can be restored. Honor can be mended. But trust..." He let the word hang in the air. "Trust once broken is delicate to repair," she sighed. "You speak truth, Monsieur Poirot. I will face whatever inquiries come." Poirot offered a gentle smile. "You are strong enough to endure them." Constance nodded, her poise returning piece by piece. Whitcomb approached Poirot, stopping a few feet away. His voice was low and hoarse. "I owe you my life." Poirot held up a hand. "Non, monsieur. You owe your life to truth. I merely introduced you to each other." Whitcomb let out a shaky breath. "I was ready to accept my fate. Grant was ready to throw me in a cell, and all the while the real killer walked free." Poirot's expression sharpened slightly. "It is dangerous, monsieur, to carry anger so openly. Had the evidence not disproved it, your temper alone might have condemned you." Whitcomb nodded grimly. "I will remember that." Poirot added, "Reginald valued your advice, even when he did not show it. Do not let grief turn to bitterness." Whitcomb bowed his head. "I'll try." The ruined financier approached with caution. "Monsieur Poirot, I suppose this means I was not summoned to be accused, but to be distracted." Poirot nodded. "Exactement. Annie hoped your presence would confuse the investigation. A man ruined by Reginald would make an easy suspect." Lockwood shook his head, relief cresting at last. I thought for a moment the universe was mocking me. Poirot smiled. It was simply reminding you that the truth, like the tide, always returns. With the household calmer and the truth fully laid bare, Poirot stepped to the center of the hall. A new morning's light spilled across the marble floors. "It is finished," he said softly. "Sir Reginald Harrowden shall have justice, and the shadow that threatened this house has passed." The room exhaled. Poirot put on his coat with elegant precision, adjusting his hat to its impeccable angle. As he made his way to the door, Eleanor called out, "Monsieur Poirot, how did you truly know? What was the final clue?" Poirot paused, hands behind his back. "The shadow, madame," he said with a faint smile. "The murderer wished it destroyed, but Poirot, he does not destroy shadows. He follows them." He gave a small bow. "Adieu, mes amis. May the future bring order where chaos once reigned." With that, Hercule Poirot stepped into the soft gray light of morning, the storm behind him, the truth restored, and the great detective silhouette, as always, perfectly composed against the dawn,